Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. We have another in our webinar series, and it's a real timely one, I'm afraid, in a lot of ways. If you've been following the news this week, we've had a couple announcements from companies that are talking about maybe missing their numbers and reporting maybe disappointing earnings. And Jeff Bezos has been giving interviews and saying that he's pretty confident that we're going to be facing a recession here if we're not already in a recession. And there's been some tech companies announcing layoffs, and it looks like we may be heading into a bit of a rough time financially or economically. And in our little neck of the woods, what that typically means is word will eventually come down, if it has not already come down, to patent departments to cut, or to at least spend more frugally, or at least more wisely. And it sometimes comes with a cut across the board, and sometimes it comes with the ability to cut in a more meaningful, thoughtful way. And we're going to talk about that, how you can future-proof your IP workflow. And what that means is how do you really cut in a way that doesn't cut your nose off to spite your face, and continues to allow you to emerge from whatever economic hardships we may be about to face with a pipeline of intellectual property that will be able to protect the products and services that your companies are going to need protected as we come out of the other end of whatever this recession or downturn will ultimately look like. We're really happy to have IP.com as a sponsor for this webinar. IP.com has been a sponsor for a number of our webinars, and we have Chris Eric on with us here today. And Chris, before we get going, do you have any words that you'd like to share?
No, just as a quick introduction, before I came to IP.com, I started in February. I was at Xerox for 22 years, and so I'm not a stranger to the IP industry. I was on more of the solutions engineering side of it, creating invention disclosures and such. So I'm happy to be on this side of the equation. It's an exciting industry and a really exciting time for us. So thanks for having me.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Renee to give all of us a little bit more of a proper introduction. So Renee, you're...
Hi there. So today's panel, we have Savon Kalmanov. He's the director of the IP division of Canon USA, overseeing both the patent prosecution and administration departments. He also provides support on patent litigation and contract matters, as well as general U.S. patent law related advice to various Canon companies and subsidiaries across the globe. Savon is a current member and past chair, vice chair, secretary, General Executive Committee member, and Patent Group Chair of the IP sections of the California Bar. Next, we have Chris Eric, and he started his introduction. He's a certified Lead Six Sigma Black Belt and the Director of Marketing at IP.com, where he leverages his marketing and Lean Six Sigma experience to help align customers with solutions to help reduce costs while maximizing productivity and ROI. Before joining IP.com, he spent 22 years at Xerox in a wide variety of roles, including solutions engineering, strategy, business development, and global product marketing. And last but not least, we have our moderator, Gene Quinn. He's a patent attorney and a leading commentator, and my husband, leading commentator on patent law and innovation policy. He founded IPWatchdog.com in 1999. It has been 22 years. And since he has twice been named one of the top 50 most influential people in IP, and has repeatedly been recognized as one of the top IP strategists in the world. So you've got a great panel today. Back to you, Gene.
Great, thanks a lot, Renee. And thank you, panel, and thank you all for joining us here for a portion of your day for this conversation. And Savon, let's bring you into the conversation and get your preliminary thoughts on this. I know, as director of IP at one of the major patenting entities, Canon. I mean, I think everybody knows Canon. What do you see? Have you been told yet to cut back? Are you seeing any headwinds yet? Are you reacting yet to what we're seeing? What are your preliminary thoughts on this topic?
Sure. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Gene, for having me as a speaker. Um, Overall, I haven't seen anything yet, but the one thing that I have a lot of confidence in is that Canon as a company has always had IP as part of their fabric of the company, their DNA, and they've always put a very high emphasis on it. So I am pretty confident that moving forward, at least again with respect to us, um, regardless of how things are may end up turning out, I think there's always going to be an emphasis on IP, and that's going to stay at the forefront in terms of any potential cutbacks. I mean, I can't say that we would be immune to anything, but I do think that IP will still continue to be a focus for all Canon groups globally.
Yeah, and that really is very, very important. And before I go any further, let me say this is if you have any questions, feel free to shoot the questions to me using the GoToWebinar control box. You can just click on questions and shoot them to me, and I'll feed them to the panel. But also, if you have comments, because I know a number of you in the audience will have similar experiences and have maybe different experiences. If you want to share your thoughts, and let's interject those into the conversation, and we can react to those as well, that would be great. Because I think what Simone just brought up is, very, very important. If you have that culture of innovation, but coupled with a culture of protecting that innovation, and patents are important. I think that really can be quite different. You look at sometimes startup companies or SMEs, they frequently will still have the founder, or maybe the founder's not the CEO anymore. Sometimes they are, or sometimes they're the CTO, and they'll be building the company still around the patents for that person. So in those situations, they are very patent centric. And in other companies where they have a long history of getting patents, they look at it very differently. So it's interesting to hear the different ways that people look at this. So, Chris, your thoughts. What are you hearing from your clients? I know you're in touch with a lot of different people. Are folks starting to cut back? Are they starting to try and talk about the financial hardships that they're facing?
They are. So we heard a lot at IPWatchdog Live. And by the way, I know I've told you this before. I'll say it again. I think IPWatchdog Live was one of the single best investments we made this year. We got to talk to a ton of customers, and we heard a mix of things about this environment. One was that folks need to get control of their costs, and they needed to get control of the process and look more at it from an innovation process and not so much just a patent process. The patenting process seemed to be kind of a very narrow focus where they would only look at a couple pieces of it. And we saw a lot of customers, either big and small, on enterprise level, or even individual consultants that said, well, we've got to kind of look at the origins of the process and what can we do to holistically look at that workflow. Because, as you know, patent costs are somewhat of a surprise to a lot of folks. In fact, I've got if you don't mind, I could share a slide real quick.
Yeah, no, go right ahead.
We've got a couple things that we pulled recently, and when we were talking to folks, they shared that these are truths, right? So we know that the patent numbers are going up. The average cost per patent is $56,000. $56,000, and for some folks, a lot of that is hidden costs. When they talk to, for example, a patent attorney, they may get kind of the lower end of the cost, not understanding what it really takes to get that patent across the finish line. What we also heard from larger enterprises is that their innovation process isn't really delivering what they want out of it, right? 95% of the innovations that they start to work on aren't making it to market. And on an average in the industry, for every $1 million spent, I'm getting a single usable patent out of that process. which tends to be highly problematic. So what we kept hearing was, what can we do to shorten the cycle time? Because the cycle time is roughly right about, I think they're quoting about 2.5 years, about 30 months it takes to get across that finish line. So what can we do to shorten that cycle time and increase that number going out? So not only are folks looking to reduce the costs, accelerate the process, but also add capacity. That was surprising as well, which is, as competition is increasing, as we're investing more in our engineering side of it, we need more capacity in our workflow. How do we do that? And standardize our processes. So that's some of the key themes that we heard at IPWatchdog Live.
So this may be a good time. Let me push this first poll that we have to see what people are doing on the input level in order to get the disclosures and information. Do you use a formal process for evaluating and prioritizing disclosures prior to submitting to a search group? Yes, a comprehensive plan. Yes, as needed. Yes, by exception, or no, not at all. Let's see what people say that they're doing here to give us an idea of what we're talking about here, or who the audience is that we have, because this will, I think, tell us, quite a lot, because I do think as we move into an area of time where money is going to become a restricting factor, the CFOs are going to start to really get involved in probably every department of companies. You're going to have to squeeze more out of what you're bringing in and better evaluate it, so that you're not wasting your resources later on. So let me close this poll now. It's been open for over a minute, and I'll share the results so we can all see them. And so yes, a formal process came in second, comprehensive process, and then yes, as needed was 45%, no 13%. So it's comprehensive process, and as needed. I suppose this is good news. I would like more. If I were the chief IP counsel or general counsel, I think I would prefer to have much more of on the yes, a comprehensive process, especially as we're moving into some hard times. Savone, what are your thoughts? How do you guys do it? How do you guys bring in the disclosures, make sure that you're pursuing what needs to be pursued?
Yeah, we do have a process in place, and it's not as needed. It is a process that is in place, and it's a cooperation between my department and each of the various business units, both within Canon USA as well as any of the other, for instance, Canon America's R&D, or any place else where there's innovation going on within a Canon subsidiary, where the IP department works in tandem with the business unit to have a process in place where when an invention idea comes in, it is evaluated, it is reviewed. We do look at it before we determine what the next step is. And in some cases, if the determination is there's not enough information, for example, we'll go back and again, in conjunction with the business unit, go back to the inventors and say, great idea, really good, but we need a lot more detail. We need details. So we do have a process in place where we're not spending our resources doing searches on ideas that are very thin, or that it would be, because we would be basically wasting time and money doing those kind of searches, as opposed to doing a search on something that is much more defined, just from an efficiency standpoint.
Yeah, and if you guys want the PowerPoint presentation, you can download that, and you can click on handouts and download it. Chris, I just want to let you know that we're seeing the full PowerPoint with the sidebar again. I don't know whether you intended that, but I just want to let you know.
Yeah.
But Savon, I agree with you on that. I mean, you know, when I was, and I don't practice at the moment, Renee convinced me to temporarily. I mean, I still pay my biannual dues, so I'm still active, and because I just can't imagine not being an active member of a bar. But I don't have clients at the moment. But when I was representing clients actively, you know, you'd get these extremely cryptic disclosures from corporations. You know, if you got 2 paragraphs, sometimes that was a lot of information, you know, and it kind of makes you wonder, who's really the inventor? You know, is it the is it the engineer scientist at the company, or is it the patent attorney? Because in my experience, when you get the 1 to 2 paragraph disclosure from the company, then those are situations where that engineer or scientist is not usually very cooperative with giving you more information. And this is all about culture. I find, you know, because if you have a culture where there's a culture of innovation that leads into a culture of patenting, and then a culture of actually doing something with the patents, you get more information. And if you don't, then you at least get cooperation. And if you're trying to cut costs, I think you need to have more cooperation. What am I missing here? Am I missing anything, Siobhan?
No, you're not. And I mean, and one of the advantages that we have of being in-house and basically handling the majority of the prosecution in-house is we have direct access to the inventors, to the business unit,
Mm-hmm.
that we can, if there's an issue like you were bringing up, Gene, in terms of getting a cryptic disclosure, we have I think we have an advantage over if we had an outside attorney come in and do it, that for example, in my case, I'm located on the same floor in our building as one of our main R&D facilities. So if I see an issue with an invention disclosure, I can just get up, walk across the building to the other side of the floor and have a one-on-one conversation with the inventor. The other advantage we have is that the business units, the developers, they're aware of the IP culture that Canon has through various internal aspects. So they know what is kind of expected of them. And they also know that in cases where maybe they have submitted something that is not of top quality, that they may be getting a visit from someone in the IP department to just go over and help explain it. And usually they're very cooperative in terms of providing updates so we can move forward. And I think, again, getting back to your main point, Gene, is I think a lot of it is the culture. Yeah, because Canon has made IP a very important part of the Canon overall culture. That goes down to each of the various business units and the inventors, and so management knows it, the inventors know it, so that there is a big cooperative effort to get a particular idea from inception to filing.
Yeah. So Chris, when you were talking to folks and they were highlighting this as an issue, did you hear any folks lamenting about the intake process and the maybe the cooperation from the initial inventor or the initial disclosures, et cetera?
Yes. So we heard a couple of different issues related to costs and cycle time and lack of standardization. So for example, like what Savon's talking about, there's some reticence for corporations, businesses to impose on an engineer that when they write a disclosure, how do you evaluate that disclosure to make sure that it's novel enough, it's good enough to move forward in the process? They shift those costs and they shift that cycle time down to, for example, the internal counsel to sit and go through the review process. That could be weeks, it could be months, depending on the volume that comes in. So what they were lamenting is, what is it that we can put in front of an engineer that, or any of our engineers, skill and organization, where they can find whether or not that their invention disclosure meets basic novelty requirements, refine that disclosure up front. And so that reduces a lot of bottlenecks and costs that go downstream. Because when you look at how cost structures are built out on this, it's much cheaper to fix the problem at the source with the engineer. If you put something in front of them that says within minutes, you can iterate on your innovation and give it a stronger chance to get through the pipeline. Or you can wait till they're gathered, clustered, sent on to someone who will eventually get through that pile of disclosures and may come back to you. And if you're in an innovation race, which most of you are, if you're in an innovation race, days count.
Yeah.
Sometimes hours count. So that's what they were lamenting is, how can we, instead of chipping away at different little pieces and parts of our innovation life cycle, how can we standardize on a platform to address that, to get our costs down? And simplify and standardize. That theme kept coming up over and over again. Simplify and standardize.
Yeah, well, I know this firsthand because I've worked with independent inventors for a long time, as many of you know, and I have my own system to help them, coach them into creating their own provisional patent applications, and the whole system. And there for a long time, as I was giving them feedback on, of their inventions and so forth. And the only way that you could do that with a variety, without specializing, and just doing it for all in independent inventors, come one, come all, is to standardize. Is they're answering a series of questions, and I know what the questions were because I created the system. And if the answer is going to be there, it's going to be in this question. And if they don't have it there, it's not going to be in anywhere. So I can know as I'm going along reading, well, they left this critical piece out that is going to be necessary for me to understand even what the invention is, because that's what this whole question was about. And each question has a very specific purpose. So I know the value of standardizing, and it really firsthand I can, and maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, but I know firsthand how important that really is to have these processes, and how it can tremendously cut costs. Now, Chris, go ahead. You want to say?
No, I was just going to say that what was refreshing about the conversations at IPWatchdog Live was we got away from, because a lot of vendors will talk about a patent search tool. You can cut your costs with just the IP search tool. You can cut some costs, but it goes well beyond that. There has to be a platform that addresses all, both ends of that spectrum, from conception all the way through monetization.
Right.
And so that it was refreshing to hear that people are looking at the origins of the process and what can I do to better optimize that.
Well, and it's funny that you say that too, because one of the frustrating things at the beginning of my career, and Siobhan, I'd like to get you to comment on this too, to see if you've had this kind of issue, is you get people to tell you what their invention is, and then you go and you do a search, and then you come back and you say, well, I'm sorry, here's 3 patents, take a look at these patents. I really, based on what you tell me, I don't see any way around these. Can you help me out here? And then they're like, well, these 3 patents have absolutely nothing to do with my invention. It's like, okay, well, they're exactly what you told me. So, and then they're like, well, they don't do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, okay, well, the first time that you have mentioned X, Y, and Z is right now. So how was I supposed to do a search on X, Y, and Z if you weren't going to tell me about that? Siobhan, I see you smiling, so I know you've had this experience as well.
Yeah. My first reaction is four-word answer. Been there, done that.
Yeah, I think we all have, right?
Yeah, and it's something to be expected, especially when dealing with inventors who are not really what I call patent savvy, who are not really, haven't had much experience in the patent world. And as an in-house counsel, one of our jobs is to help educate them. And so we tend to use an example like that, Gene, which happens. We use that as a teaching tool to teach them, hey, when you write the disclosure, I want everything up to the kitchen sink in there. The more, the better. Don't leave anything out. Doesn't matter. Right. That way we can make a proper evaluation. And I also kind of chuckle and give them by the way, if you do that, you won't see my ugly face in your office every 5 minutes asking you for more information. So I tend to see that more with the inventors who are kind of just getting into the waters of patents. On the flip side, We have some inventors who are very patent savvy, and we get excellent disclosures from them that basically, in some cases, there's very little work that one of my attorneys needs to do to get it going. So again, I think that goes back to some education as well as the culture.
Yeah, and and this is very earlier on in my career. I wouldn't say well, yeah, it's probably pretty early on in my patent career. I was using like pretty much like everybody does to some extent. You have questions that in a questionnaire that you use to get some information before you do a search, and I had sent this out to a client, and they had come back and answered it, and I found what I thought was the guy's invention, and he comes back, like we're saying here, and they said, "Oh, it doesn't do this." So I went and I found that, and then he said, "You clearly just don't understand my invention." And I'm pretty convinced that he was just looking for a refund, and he was complaining. He was going to file ethics complaints and everything, and I didn't get enough money to out of that to deal with any kind of problem client. So I just said, look, just go away. I'll refund your money. And then what I did was I added a question to the questionnaire that said, is there anything else that you need to tell me about your invention that that hasn't been provoked by one of the previous questions? And because it is critical, I mean, absolutely essential that you get all the information that you need before you do that search. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels. And the problem that I have is not only you're spinning your wheels on the front end, it really does matter later on when you start getting the office actions, because now the applications have been drafted without an eye towards what is likely going to need to be the real point of novelty to cover really what the innovation is in the marketplace, and the likely distinguishing arguments you're going to need to make later on in the fine arguments to overcome the examiner's rejections, which just continues to stretch us out. Which now, if you're talking about coming in and trying to shrink budgets, just becomes enormously important. And so there is a question here. I mean, feel free to comment on what I just said, and I'll ask both of you this. But the question I have is, do you think that it is important, and perhaps even increasingly important, for companies to be considering a patent liaison? I know that, or a patent engineer. They go by different titles, which acts as that kind of interface between the inventor and the in-house law department. That sort of is, and often that person was an inventor, maybe even in the same company, and now is taken and passed the patent bar, so they kind of know both worlds, and they can help translate. They're almost like a patent law translator to the inventors. Savon, do you guys use somebody like that, or is that you?
We don't have anybody, with that particular role, basically, and it's me, but it's also a number of the attorneys that I have that are working directly with the inventors or with the business units where, we have attorneys that are embedded with in other Canon locations other than where I'm located, and so they have direct access to not only, again, the business unit, and then within the business unit, the inventors. So they basically act as your example of the patent liaison, where they work with the inventors to, again, educate them as needed, get the information, go back and forth. And again, we so far have had a pretty good cooperative interface between our department and the various inventive entities out there, because again, they know what to expect. They know that they're not surprised, or they shouldn't be surprised when if I come back to them, or somebody comes back to them and says, again, great invention, but we need more. Because I also think, being in-house, we also understand that these inventors, frankly speaking, patents are not their priority. Their priority is to get the project that they're working on out the door. So I think being in-house, we're very keen to that we're very sensitive to that particular aspect of the inventors. So I can understand maybe why an inventor may not have provided the best disclosure at a point in time, especially when they've got a deliverable due in a week. So we do take that in mind and try to work with them around that, keeping that in mind. So again, long answer to your question, Gene, is we don't have a specific individual or individuals designated like that. It's really the attorney that's assigned to handle a particular case acts as that liaison between the IP department and the particular inventor group that they're working with on that project.
Right. So, and just so the audience knows, because I know we talked about this the other day, but Canon has, you have a full legal department that services Canon in-house.
Correct. We have our department is basically we're essentially a small law firm. We have close to about 40 individuals, and we not only handle all of the Canon, what I call America's, all of the U.S. based inventions, but we also support prosecution for our parent company in Japan, Canon Inc., as well as a number of Canon global companies. So yeah, so we get we're domestic and international, for lack of a better term.
So I would think that the patent engineer and patent liaison person would probably be far more important in this equation for those companies, smaller perhaps, that are leveraging outside counsel more. Because if you had a person like that and you could really get much better information to the lawyer who's doing the work for you, then so much of this is going to go smoother. You know, and maybe now is not the right time to be telling your company that you need to hire somebody new. But you know, maybe you sometimes have to spend a little money to save money long term.
Right, and then I just to add on real quick is, yeah, I think that's a good example, because the person inside, again, has easier access, I believe. For example, you could have, you know, an attorney might be trying to call an inventor and the inventor's not picking up the phone. Again, in my case, I can just get up, walk, you know, 100 feet, and I'm right in that inventor's office or the inventor's cube, and they can't really ignore me. Again, I don't want to take up their time, but so that is an advantage, I think, Gene, of where you may not have the resources available, but at least if you do have a single point of contact inside, that inside person probably is going to have better access as needed, which will become more efficient on both sides.
Yeah, because Chris, I think that I mean, you know, that would have to help on the intake side. You know, I would think, you know, because some of these engineers, I wonder, you know, we say and we think that, you know, they don't really want to do the patent process, you know, but it may be that they're just, you know, they're not comfortable with it. They don't understand.
Yeah, so I do see the value of a patent liaison, but I could even argue that if you take something like IQ Ideas, it was a product I was referring to earlier when we're talking about iterating on novelty. You take something like that, and that ends up being essentially a patent engineer, a patent liaison on every engineer's desk for that on-demand instant novelty. That's simplified. There then becomes a common language between the engineer and, let's say, an official patent liaison for a business unit. I know back at Xerox, you know, when I first started a patent application on this thing called a JDF packaging method, and everyone's probably like, what is that? Well, suffice to say, it was a technology we were working on with Adobe. And there was only like 4 of us in the corporation working on it in a small working group with Adobe. So, you know, being able to have a tool that helps me iterate on that novelty where, you know, the IP counsel at the time would not have been able to help. They're not part of the working group. But refining that process and having that common language to get to someone who oversees an entire business unit, I think could help accelerate the process.
So let me ask you this. So how does that work? How does it help refine the novelty? I'm a little bit familiar with it, but you know, like how do you describe, I mean, the engineer types in an answer, right? You know, to a question, or it's guided, right?
Yeah, so it's near and dear to my heart because I mentioned, I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt. So I love Lean Six Sigma, and it uses Lean Six Sigma methodologies, problem-solving methodologies, to help an engineer construct this invention proposal, this idea, and write it out. It uses the same AI engine that we use in Innovation Queue to go out and let's say that, oh my God, I just had an epiphany. Bicycle, let's have two wheels and a frame. It's going to instantly go out with patent and non-patent literature, and it's going to find out whether or not this idea I have is truly novel, and helps you iterate on that theme, pressing on novelty, different aspects of that. It also helps it has a part where it can generate a novelty score, and that's that common language I was talking about, where if you've got disparate groups in your organization, and it's a Canon or at Xerox, it's innovation time. You go out to your groups and let's get some ideas rolling. Some people, this is their first rodeo. They've not written an invention disclosure. And then having a tool that evaluates what you wrote, gives you a guiding score. It doesn't tell you whether or not you're going to get a patent, but everyone is measured the exact same way, be it a single engineer or 10,000 engineers in an organization. You're evaluated against a common evolving tool set instantly. And it addresses that barrier. I think, Savone, the other day you were chatting about, which is if you just go to an engineer and you say, hey, I was looking at your invention proposal, can you take another swag at it? Their answer is probably no. Anything that stops me, right, and impedes progress, I really don't want to be involved in. The idea of on-demand novelty changes the equation, because as you're authoring this invention proposal, you want to get to someone who says, great, it's past a certain threshold, a certain bar, let's get it on into the process. It can find things that you may be possibly infringing on, etc. But once again, it's an innovation accelerator. Acts, I think, as a patent liaison on a desktop.
Yeah, so and that is something that you would do to get the initial disclosure before the search. Then is that how that would work?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that then leads me to, and I asked that as a setup question because I have another poll question that I'd like to push out here. Do you currently leverage search outsourcing in your IP workflow? Want to get to this question before I'm looking at the time, so I want to make sure we get to all the topics we wanted to make sure we covered here. Wow, looking at the responses coming in here, these are kind of all over the map here. But I'm a fan of whatever can be used, and if it's a tool that can be on the engineer scientist desktop to help them iterate based on novelty in real time, I think that's a great tool, because you know, for other reasons too, other than just how do I want to say it? I mean, one of the things that a lot of folks suffer from in this area is what's known as imposter syndrome, and sometimes the inventors that have the best ideas think that their ideas are not all that great, you know, and so if there's a tool there that you can have that people can put information into, and then in real time start to iterate to get some feedback, I think that can be very positive, because you know, in a lot of organizations it seems that inventors will say, oh well, hey, you know, my invention is a doohickey that's yellow. Well, if a doohickey exists, making it yellow is not going to make it patentable. You know, right? And they're convinced that that's just so unique. But then on the other end, the stuff that you really, really want to capture is the inventor who thinks, well, my contribution can't, I mean, if I came up with it, it can't really be all that impressive or important. And it really is, you know. So if you have that kind of tool that helps them filter out and understand what is good and what is not good, and what they need to be moving forward with, and where they need to be putting their time, I think that's very useful. So let me share these results here quickly. We have 30% that says they do not leverage outsourced at all. Some yes 20%, or no, I'm sorry, all of it 20% and some 50%. So do those results surprise you, Chris?
No, actually, those are kind of in line with the conversations we had. It was interesting that the reasons people cited for outsourcing, and it kind of reminds me of the old film days. So I'm a photographer, and I remember the days of you shoot a picture, right, and you develop the film, and you sit in a dark room like Ansel Adams. Right?
Yeah.
And it could be weeks that you spend getting that master print done. Well, I'll tell you what, the iPhone kind of changed that, because everyone can be an Ansel Adams in about 5 seconds, right? Take a picture, like that works. And what we've done with AI allows us to do what Ansel Adams is doing in a week or a month. And so it was surprising to hear the reasons for people outsourcing. They're dated. Like circa 1990s. It's complex to do the research. Really complex. The tools are complex, and Boolean. And by the way, fan of Boolean, but you know what? There may be faster methods to get to the same answer. And so I was surprised to hear that it was complexity, and it's hard to train people on doing that. We have like a single expert in house, and so that was the surprising part. And I think that it's about time for a paradigm shift where selective outsourcing is okay. We are a selective outsourcing provider, right? But wholesale outsourcing, I think, is outdated, not required, given how far AI has come. And it can turn, similar to iPhone turning everyone to a photographer, AI can turn nearly anyone in an organization into a researcher, a patent researcher.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that with searching anyway is that you're never looking for the 100% answer, because if you're trying to find the 100% answer, one, you can't find it at the time of filing anyway, and two is the amount of money that would go into it would be cost prohibitive even if you could obtain it. So you're always looking for a certain level of confidence. So what is the level of confidence that you're comfortable with to move forward? So Sivan, how does Canon handle that?
Well, when I agree. When we do our, and step back, I will only outsource. We only outsource unless they're only in the case where there's a resource issue internally. Otherwise, everything is kept in-house for us. Now, in terms of determining, looking at what we're looking for, I agree. You're never going to find what I'll call the 102 art. That's very, very rare. It's typically, when you're searching, you're going to be looking for the 103, the obviousness art. So that one is, when we're looking at it, we're just going to look, and obviously we're going to try to do as best a search as possible. And then when we get the results, obviously before we turn them over to the engineers and the inventors, because we know that they're very busy, is we try to remove the noise for them, so that we're only giving them what we feel are potentially the best. Again, keeping in mind their time frame and what their workload is in terms of project versus patents. So again, it's an iterative process between us and the business unit. If I could just step back, you guys were talking about, Gene, you were saying about some inventors may be hesitant versus others think they have got, the next great thing. Basically, what we try to, when we talk with the inventors, what I've tried to preach to them is, I would rather them submit something and let us worry about whether it's the next great invention or nothing else, because I would be more concerned that they may not think they have something when they really do, and they left a great invention that would be very beneficial to Canon on the ground. So so our philosophy is, submit, but when you do, please try to understand what the area is you're submitting in, and try to be as specific as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good advice, because if you know the area, you're far more likely to be a successful inventor. You want to stay in your lane, and that's not to say that people don't have epiphanies that are outside their lane. And I mean, some people are very creative, but if you know what know the lane that you're in, you're going to be much more, you're going to be much better inventor, and you're going to know the prior art, and you're going to know where the pitfalls are as well. So Chris, any thoughts on what Sivan has said?
Well, just one. It was a comment I was going to make earlier. Is back to the engineer or the inventor. Yeah, there's something to be said that when they write a disclosure on day one and day two, you come back and you say, hey, do me a favor. Can you tweak this or fix this? That's one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what they really hate is back to the patent submission I did. The first time someone came back to me was about 9 months into the process. My first office action. It's not surprised that I got an office action, but I got one. And I since moved on to a different project. So I've got someone knocking on my door saying, hey, can I bring this project back up to you? Any of us here, anyone on the phone, like if someone puts something back in front of you that you worked on 9 months ago, there's some cobwebs you need to clear.
Yep.
And so, the immediacy and the benefit of having that on-demand novelty and iterating up front, if you can culturally get over that, hey, listen, we're just going to have you refine up front with these tools, I think that the better off you are on the back end and getting more stuff through the pipeline.
Well, I absolutely agree with that too, and I also think that and maybe these days are gone, but the days when attorneys used to try and get stuff by an examiner, and those have to be over, particularly in an era where cost is a big concern. I think that when you file an application, certainly today and certainly for some time now, you have to have claims in the application that you feel are allowable as written. And you're going to be wrong. The examiner's not going to agree. But if you, at the time that you file, don't have great confidence that there are claims that are allowable as written, then you're just going to string out the whole process. Now, that's not to say that you don't push the envelope with some of the claim sets in there, but you can't just file wide open claim sets where they're pie in the sky and you're reaching for everything, because the examiner is going to say no, and you're not going to get anything, and you're not going to get any useful information. If you file an application that allows the examiner to do a crappy search to reject you, then the examiner is going to do a crappy search and reject you. If you file a good claim set that requires the examiner to do a better search, or forcing the examiner to do a better search before they reject you, and then I think that that's the way that you do this. And then certainly if you're working for a corporation that's interested in a portfolio rather than a patent. Now, if you're working for a small company or an individual and they want a patent or a smaller portfolio, then maybe your strategies need to be a little bit different. But you can always, at least for now, they haven't changed the continuation rules, so you can still circle back and try and get more later. But let me launch this last poll to see, where do people think that the greatest opportunity for their improvement in the workflow is? Where do you all want or believe you can get the greatest improvement? Is it in the disclosure? Is it in reduced search time? Is it in improving the grant rate? Is it prosecution costs? This is interesting. This is maybe not surprising, but I think it is going to be interesting results here, guys. Leave the poll open here for just a couple more minutes. Okay, the poll's been open for over a minute, so I think we can probably close it. The numbers are hovering about the same, even as more comes in. So we have 41% say improved disclosure quality, Then we had 28 and 28 say increased efficiency of IP evaluation and prioritization, and then reduced prosecution costs. And only 3% said improve the grant rate. So, you know, I think, and maybe the way that we pitched this webinar kind of skews the results a little bit. I don't know, but improving the disclosure quality coming in first, I think it shows a real sophistication and understanding, you know, because if you do that, then then the other two, the increased evaluation, efficiency evaluation, and the reduction in prosecution costs, also all three of those things are fundamentally, in my mind, tied together.
Yep. Yeah, I agree, Gene. That I was going to mention that. Yeah, whereas I'm not 100%, I'm not really surprised because yeah, if you improve the quality up front, then everything downstream should improve along the way. And especially like I said, in a cost cutting environment, you know, look to see where that might be something to look at is where can you make maybe an improvement in one place that's going to have a trickle down effect to move things and be more cost effective as you move through this system.
Yeah, it does really. It does. You know, and and maybe it's just because of my own work and everything that I've done professionally, but I just feel like if this cuts across so many different areas. If you have a better foundation, then everything you build on that foundation works better.
I agree.
You know, and then if you have a better input, then, and I know people didn't put reduce search times and costs, but the search is better, right? And the search that people are doing is better, which then leads to a better refinement of what the invention actually is. And then that does allow for better evaluation of what you need to do are we going to go forward with this, or are we not going to go forward with this? You know, is this novel enough? Is it, well, like you said, Savon, novelty hopefully is not an issue. You know, is it unique enough? Or is it, you know, just too close to being obvious? And that has all to do in the world with how long it's going to take to get through prosecution, right? The more unique it is, the easier the examiner will find it to say yes.
Theoretically.
So these things all weave together. So
There was one other thing. So what we also heard, for once you get past that early innovation process, we did hear a number of folks that were doing, for example, the research internally, that they are kind of drowning in that process and looking for ways to optimize it. We had one consultant that's using our platform, for example, Shadow Ridge Analytics, and she framed it beautifully. Using conventional methods for doing research took her 10 times longer than using our tool set. So optimizing that research process, we're still fundamentally focused on that as well, right? That's the flagship part of our overall workflow. We're focused on optimizing that. So, and kind of proof in the pudding is, you know, we've got a couple thousand examiners at USPTO that use our software. And if anyone has crushing quotas, right, of stuff to get through, it's these guys and gals that are doing patent examination. And so we're still optimizing that part. We're not ignoring the need to efficiently and quickly discover and drill down. And we're not talking about trying to do a face-off against something like Boolean and say, we were 1,000 times better than that. No, in fact, even if you said we deliver the same quality, what we can do is 10 times faster. So while the marksman next to me is still firing their single shot, I've got 10 arrows on the same spot, and that's pretty critical to the efficiency of a workflow. And so I just thought I'd throw that in, as I think that there still needs to be a critical focus on optimizing that part of the workflow as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities to optimize, and anything that can be done to make the workflow more efficient and without compromising quality. And some
Yes.
of the ways that we've talked about doing this here today are going to increase quality. So I find those, to be the most beneficial, because you're going to streamline your processes, you're going to get better information, you're going to make better judgments on what to pursue and what not to pursue. And then as you're pursuing it, your application should be better and stronger, and that should cut down prosecution time. And doing all of this will pay dividends in the long run. So doing this now, if you're not already doing it now before you're told to do it, or before it's mandated, or before there's across the board cuts, I think is going to be to your benefit. So we're almost at the end of the time together, and what I will say is, if any of you are interested in the IP.com platform, we'll be happy to link you up with Chris, and Chris can give you a demo, or make sure that somebody gets in touch with you to give you a demo of their system. But we really appreciate you all being here and talking to us about this important issue here today. But like to give you each an opportunity to wrap up with final thoughts. Sivan, what is your takeaway message for today? If there's one thing you hope people remember, what is that?
It's just that if you are currently in a cost-cutting environment, or you are seeing something potentially coming down the road, I agree with Gene. You really should take a look at your workflow and see where you can potentially make some adjustments, such that when those cost cuts do come, you're prepared and you're in place to be able to have a quality application that was produced more efficiently. And again, my recommendation would be to try to move that effort up front, as we've discussed, in terms of making sure that when you got your disclosure and you're starting to move forward with that disclosure is as high quality as possible, because when it comes to time to drafting the application, you're going to save time of having to go of the back and forth with the attorney drafting it, trying to get more clarification with the inventor. So again, just maybe, again, I agree, Gene, you need to start looking at the workflow and perhaps shift some of the focus of where it is right now to more upfront work to save cost and time down the road.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sivan. I really appreciate you being here today. And Chris, your final thoughts.
Well, what Sivan just said was music to my ears. I love it. It's workflow, and looking at your IP workflow as an innovation lifecycle, right, from end to end. And if you haven't, now's the time, right, to modernize and standardize that workflow on AI, right? If you're looking to accelerate your IP, accelerate cost reduction, get more efficiency and capacity in your workflow, AI is the only path. And a single platform that addresses all that, that's your only path forward.
Yeah, and my final thoughts, and thanks, Chris. My final thought is simply, whatever you do to cut costs, don't have it be just ram down your patent attorney's throat a lower fee. Because if you're going to do that, all you're going to do is you're going to get less work. You're not going to get better quality, you're going to get lower quality. So if you need to cut costs, if your company needs to cut costs, and many of your companies are going to need to do that, you need to look internally into your systems and figure out ways to better work your end, which means a better workflow. And if you can provide better information to your attorneys that are representing you, then it would be legitimate to maybe ask for better rates. Now, That then means that they're going to be doing less work, but that means you have to be doing some of the work yourself. So how are you going to be able to do that work? How are you going to be able to do it in a better, streamlined, more intelligent way? And how are you going to contribute to reducing prosecution costs? And that means having a better product at the front end that has more, maybe vetted a little bit better and has considered the obviousness issues a little bit better up front. And that means a better foundation to begin with. So that's my final thought. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you spending today with us. Thank you, Sivan. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Renee. And that's all we have for today. We hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.